The sidewalk was wet under my boots, glistening with oil rainbow streaks, as I dragged my old fishing cooler across the driveway. Midnight. The kind that sinks into your bones. I had learned to trust those shadows. You could always tell which neighbor was up to no good by the gleam in their windows, the creak of a porch board behind you. Sharp metallic clank. That's what stopped me in my tracks. The driveway up to my dock, built by my father's calloused hands, patched by mine every spring for 20 years, now blocked. Not by a fallen branch, not by misplaced trash. 2 steel gates chained right through the posts, with a plastic sign zip-tied dead center. Emergency repair, access forbidden by order of the homeowner association. That meant Karen and her sister Sandra, the real gatekeepers of this lakeside slice of hell. I could see them in my mind. Karen, blonde hair knotted up like she ran for office in her sleep, always smirking when you lost. But this? She'd outdone herself. 2 strangers in high-vis jackets lounged by the sign, shuffling cigarettes, watching me with faces as blank as drain covers. The sour smell of gasoline drifted up, some work truck nearby, engine idling and coughing out gray. The air was cool, almost cold for June, but sweat prickled on the back of my neck. I set down the cooler. "You fellows don't live here," I said. The taller one spat, wiped his hands on his jeans. "We ain't got no choice," he said, not bothering to look at me. "Work order. Area's closed. You'll have to come back Monday." No apology, not even eye contact. "My dock's right there," I pointed, lamp swinging on the post, shimmering in the fog. "And my boat needs to be tied up, storm rolling in. You blind?" The other guy shrugged, fingers flicking over his phone. Karen, I realized, was nowhere in sight, but I could smell her perfume in the air, a whiff of lilac, synthetic and sharp. Flash of memory. My dad bent over the same dock, his old army jacket draped over a piling. Respect the water, son, but don't ever trust the people who think they own it. Seed jacket. I gripped the chain, cold metal bit my palm. "Give me the key," I said, louder than I meant. The tall guy raised an eyebrow. "We just take orders, man. Drop it. I've had a long night." My voice cracked. "This dock's mine. Who the hell approved this?" That's when I noticed the clipboard, Sandra's handwriting angled tight and mean, signature at the bottom, job number circled twice. No actual contractor listed, just emergency drainage safety concern. Right. Karen and Sandra loved drama as much as rulebooks. A deep rumble echoed across the water. Thunder. The storm was coming fast. I thought of that old boat of mine, tied loose and bobbing in the chop. "Watch that bowline, or you'll lose her." Dad's voice in my head again, steady as lake fog. I took a step forward, but the big guy shifted, blocking me. "Go home. Doc will be there Monday, unless you want trouble." Bile rose up in my throat. The idea of my boat drifting loose, cracking up on the rocks, was enough to make my chest ache. "You want to explain to me?" I asked, low and sharp. "How you can block a man from his own property?" He just laughed, real slow, like I was a squirrel yapping at a bulldozer. "You want to take it up? Take it up with the homeowner association." That name again? Always them. Never a person you could choke some sense into. The air had turned heavy, almost electric. That old feeling when you know the game is rigged but you have to play anyway. I pressed my fist to the fence, feeling every beat of my heart on the metal links, the way you press a bruise to know you're still alive. Behind me, a car door slammed, headlights cut through rain coming in sideways. That's when a second voice called out, rough and familiar. "You looking for trouble tonight?" My neighbor, Martin, emerged from the dark, jacket zipped to his chin and his dog on a short leash. For a split second, I hoped for backup. Instead, Martin squinted at me, then at the sign. "You'd better listen, Ben," he said, voice flat. "They're not bluffing this time." I felt that little crack in my gut, where, when you need someone, all you get is a shrug and a turn back. You ever have a whole history with someone? Tailgates, beers, late-night bonfires by that very dock, and in one moment, they're just another face in the crowd, siding against you? Why is it always the people you trust who twist the knife slowest? I tried not to let it show. I just nodded at Martin, gritted my teeth, turned my back on the guards and the talk and the sign that said, "I didn't matter." Every step away from that fence felt like walking off a ledge. Rain hit the brim of my cap, stinging cold all the way down my collar. My hands shook as I dug for keys. I caught a glimpse of my own face in the window, older than last summer, angrier too. Inside, the clock cursed me. 1:13 a.m. My heart was still pounding. My arms ached. All I could see behind my eyelids was the chain on that gate, my boat rocking against splintered pilings, and Karen's perfume drifting up the path like a bad memory. Funny thing is, people think a man breaks all at once. Truth, it's slower. One fence, one old friend turning his back, one phantom voice at midnight. That's how it starts. And right then, thunder booming over the water, I knew I was in for a long fight. The storm hit around 3 that morning. I stood at my kitchen window, watching the rain drive across the lake like bullets, knowing my boat was taking a beating out there. Coffee burned bitter on my tongue, but I kept drinking it anyway. Needed something to hold on to. By sunrise, the damage was done. 20-foot waves had slammed my old fishing boat against the rocks near the north shore. Hull cracked, motor mount twisted. 20 years of weekend mornings reduced to fiberglass splinters floating in the shallows. I stood there in my rain gear, water seeping through my boots, staring at what used to be my escape from all this neighborhood politics. The insurance adjuster showed up Tuesday. Young guy with a clipboard and a practiced frown, took pictures of everything, wrote down serial numbers. "Storm damage," he said, clicking his pen. "But there's a complication. Says here you were cited for improper mooring by your homeowner association. That might affect coverage." Improper mooring? The words came out like I'd swallowed glass. I've moored that boat the same way for 2 decades. He shrugged, flipped through his papers. "Association filed a complaint 3 days ago. Says you violated emergency safety protocols." There it was, Karen's signature on the complaint form, dated the day before the storm hit. She'd planned this. That afternoon, I walked to the community mailbox cluster, the kind where everyone's business gets sorted in one metal shed by the road. My box was stuffed with 3 envelopes, all bearing the homeowner association's seal, a little lighthouse logo that used to mean something around here. Now, it just made me sick. First notice, violation of emergency safety protocols, $500. Second, unauthorized watercraft storage during declared maintenance period, $750s. Third, interference with emergency personnel, $300. Total, $1,500 for trying to save my own boat from a storm. The kicker was the fine print. Repeat violation subject to vessel confiscation and dock privileges revocation. I crumpled the papers, then smoothed them out again. Evidence. In my dad's old army jacket, the one I'd worn to check the boat that first night, I found a folded 20 and a compass that hadn't worked since Vietnam. Dad would have handled this different. He'd have knocked on doors, talked to people, found a way to make it right. Payoff jacket. But times had changed. People had changed. "Ben, that you?" Mrs. Henderson's voice carried across the parking area. She was loading groceries into her sedan, gray hair pinned up neat as always. Used to bring me casseroles after Dad passed. "Morning, Mrs. Henderson." I tried to keep my voice steady. She lowered her voice, glanced around like someone might be listening. "Heard about your boat. Such a shame. But, you know..." She paused, adjusting her purse strap. "Karen showed everyone pictures at yesterday's meeting. Your dock looked pretty dangerous. All those loose boards, rusted nails sticking out. Could have hurt someone." My blood went cold. "What pictures?" "Oh, you know, from the safety inspection. That young man with the clipboard took them last week." She shook her head. "I always said the dock needed work, but I never thought it was that bad. Good thing they caught it before someone got hurt." I stared at her. This woman had watched me rebuild those boards 2 summers ago, had seen me sand and stain every plank. "Mrs. Henderson, you were there when I refinished that dock. You remember? You brought me lemonade." Her face went blank, like a channel switching off. "Well, I'm sure you did your best, dear, but safety is safety." She climbed into her car and drove away without looking back. Have you ever had the ground shift under your feet? Not an earthquake, something quieter. When the people who've known you for years suddenly see a stranger. When your own neighbors look at you like you're the problem. That evening, I drove to the north shore where my boat had washed up. The pieces were scattered across 50 yards of rocky beach. I picked up what I could salvage, a tackle box, some rope, the lucky lure Dad gave me when I was 12. Everything else was junk. As I loaded the truck, I noticed tire tracks in the soft sand, fresh ones from a heavy vehicle. Someone had been here recently, maybe this morning. I followed the tracks back toward the tree line and found cigarette butts, same brand those guards at my dock had been smoking. Why would anyone come back here, unless they were making sure the evidence was gone? I knelt by the water's edge, letting the cold waves numb my fingers, and tried to piece it together. The timing was too perfect. Storm forecast 3 days out. Emergency dock closure the night before. Complaint filed to block my insurance. Pictures of a dangerous dock that I knew was solid as bedrock. Someone had orchestrated this whole thing. Someone who wanted my dock out of commission and my boat destroyed. Someone who needed me to look like the bad guy when the dust settled. Thunder rolled across the water again, not from storm clouds this time, but from a speedboat cutting through the evening calm. I squinted into the fading light and saw 2 figures on deck. One blonde, one brunette, both raising glasses like they were celebrating something. Karen and Sandra, 50 yards offshore, toasting my misery. I stood up, wiped my hands on my jeans, and made them a promise they couldn't hear over their engine noise. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because sometimes a man reaches a point where being reasonable stops making sense, where playing by their rules just gets you played. I was done being reasonable. The community center smelled like burnt coffee and floor wax, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry wasps. 23 neighbors packed into folding chairs, most of them avoiding eye contact as I walked in. Karen sat at the head table with a stack of folders, wearing a navy blazer that made her look like she ran for city council. Sandra flanked her right side, identical haircut, identical smirk. "Thank you all for coming to this emergency session," Karen began, voice carrying that fake authority people use when they think a title makes them important. "We have serious safety concerns to address." I took a seat in the back, heard the whispers start immediately. "That's him. Poor judgment. Could have been a lawsuit. The kind of small-town poison that spreads faster than wildfire." Karen clicked open a laptop, projected images onto the portable screen. "These photos document severe structural damage to a private dock that directly threatened public safety." The first image showed rotted planking, rusted bolts, a support beam sagging toward the water. Dangerous as hell. Also not my dock. My heart hammered against my ribs. "That's not..." I started to stand. "Please hold questions until the presentation concludes," Karen cut me off, raising one manicured hand. Click. Next photo. More decay, broken railings, a warning sign that read, "Condemned" in red letters. Another dock I'd never seen in my life. "Due to Mr. Davis's negligence," Karen continued, "the association was forced to take emergency action. When confronted, Mr. Davis became hostile towards safety personnel and attempted to breach restricted areas." Martin Cross stood up from the third row. "My old drinking buddy, the guy who'd helped me rebuild my truck engine last fall. I was there," he said, voice steady as granite. "Saw Ben arguing with those guards, getting aggressive. Could have been real ugly if I hadn't stepped in." Every word hit like a punch to the kidneys. I watched Martin's face, the same face that had laughed at my jokes, borrowed my tools, sat on my deck drinking beer and talking about Vietnam. Now he looked at me like I was something that crawled out from under a rock. "The safety inspection revealed multiple code violations," Sandra added, reading from a clipboard. "Improper load-bearing calculations, non-compliance with waterfront construction standards, potential environmental hazards." Big words that sounded official and meant nothing. Mrs. Henderson raised her hand. "What about insurance liability? If someone got hurt?" "Exactly our concern," Karen nodded. "The association could face significant legal exposure. We had no choice but to act decisively." I stood up, chair scraping loud against the tile floor. "Those aren't pictures of my dock." My voice carried further than I expected, silencing the room. "I don't know what dock you photographed, but it sure as hell wasn't mine." Karen's smile went sharp as a blade. "Mr. Davis, emotional denial is understandable, but the evidence speaks for itself. These images were taken by certified inspectors during a routine safety audit." "Show me the inspection report," I said. "Show me the paperwork. Show me one piece of documentation that proves you people had authority to touch my property." The room went quiet except for the air conditioning rattling overhead. Karen shuffled through her folders. Sandra whispered something in her ear. 30 seconds stretched into an hour. Finally, Karen cleared her throat. "The inspection was conducted under emergency protocol provisions. Full documentation will be available for review once the safety hazard has been remediated." Translation: "We'll show you the paperwork after we've had time to fake it." "This is bullshit," I said, louder than intended. A few neighbors gasped. Mrs. Patterson clutched her purse like I might rob her. "You people destroyed my boat, cost me $1,500 in fines, and you can't even produce a real inspection report?" "Mr. Davis," Karen's voice went ice cold, "your attitude here tonight demonstrates exactly why emergency action was necessary. Hostile behavior toward community safety officials, refusal to acknowledge clear hazards, and now verbal aggression at an official proceeding." She was painting me into a corner, making every word I said sound like evidence of guilt. The classic Karen move: provoke you until you lose your temper, then play victim when you snap back. But here's what she didn't know. I'd been dealing with bullies since basic training. Sometimes you have to let them think they're winning. I sat back down, folded my hands, smiled like I'd just figured out the punchline to a joke. "You know what, Karen? You're absolutely right. I apologize for my tone. These safety concerns are serious business." Her eyes narrowed. She'd expected me to keep fighting, keep looking like the angry old man causing trouble. Instead, I was agreeing with her. In her world, that meant weakness. "The association appreciates your cooperation," she said carefully. "Oh, I'm very cooperative," I replied. "In fact, I'd like to volunteer to help with the investigation. Maybe I could get copies of those inspection reports, talk to the certified inspectors, make sure we're handling this properly." Sandra shot her sister a look. Karen's smile faltered for just a second, long enough for me to know I'd touched a nerve. "The investigation is being handled by qualified professionals," Karen said. "Community volunteers aren't necessary." "Of course," I nodded, "but I'd hate for there to be any questions later. You know how these things can get complicated. Insurance companies asking questions, county inspectors wanting documentation. Better to have everything absolutely perfect." The room was watching this chess match, sensing the tension but not understanding the moves. Karen was realizing that I wasn't going to keep playing the angry victim. I was going to play her game, with her rules, on her board. And that scared her more than my yelling ever could. The meeting ended 20 minutes later with a motion to monitor the situation pending professional remediation. I shook hands, smiled at the neighbors who wouldn't meet my eyes, and walked out into the parking lot feeling like I'd just drawn first blood. Sometimes the best way to catch a liar is to let them keep lying until they forget what story they started with. Time to see just how good Karen's memory really was. The old Beacon Tavern sat at the edge of town like a forgotten promise. Neon beer signs flickering in windows that hadn't been cleaned since the Clinton administration. I pushed through the heavy door, breathing in that familiar mix of cigarette ghosts and spilled whiskey that clung to the wood paneling like a second coat of paint. Jake Mills hunched over the far end of the bar, nursing what looked like his third bourbon. 28 years old, city inspector's badge clipped to his shirt pocket, shoulders bent like he was carrying the weight of every building he'd ever condemned. I'd seen him around town. Earnest kid, always measured twice, cut once. Tonight he looked like someone had kicked his dog. I ordered a beer, took the stool 2 down from his. Close enough to talk, far enough to let him decide if he wanted company. The bartender, a weathered guy named Lou, slid me a cold one and went back to wiping glasses that were already clean. "Rough week?" I asked, not looking directly at Jake. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Rough month, rough year. Hell, rough life." He drained his glass, signaled for another. "You ever do something you knew was wrong, but you did it anyway because the alternative was worse?" I thought about that. Every man has, son. Question is whether you can live with it. Jake turned toward me then, eyes red-rimmed and unfocused. "You're Ben Davis, right? The dock guy?" When I nodded, he shook his head. "Man, I'm sorry about your boat. That storm was brutal." "Storms happen," I said. "It's the people who make them worse that bother me." He stared into his bourbon like it might have answers. "Yeah, well, sometimes people don't have a choice." The bartender set down his fresh drink, and Jake's hand shook slightly as he lifted it. You know what the worst part about this job is? Everyone expects you to be perfect. One mistake, one bad call, and suddenly you're the guy who let the apartment building fall down. I sipped my beer, let the silence stretch. In my experience, people who need to talk will find their way to it. You just have to give them space. My daughter starts college next fall, Jake said after a while. State school, nothing fancy, but it's still 20 grand a year. My ex-wife, she's remarried now, but that doesn't mean she's helping with tuition. He laughed bitterly. Funny how divorce works. You lose half your stuff, but keep all the responsibilities. College is expensive, I agreed. Yeah, and city inspector jobs don't exactly come with big signing bonuses. He swirled the bourbon, watching the amber liquid catch the light. So, when someone offers you a little extra work on the side, unofficial stuff, you don't ask too many questions. My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice casual. Side work? Jake nodded, took another sip. Safety inspections for homeowner associations, private contracts, cash payment, usually straightforward stuff. Pool deck, playground equipment, maybe a walking path. Take some photos, file a basic report, everyone's happy. Sounds reasonable, I said. It was, until last week. He set down his glass harder than necessary. This woman, Karen something, calls me up, says she needs an emergency inspection for a private dock. Safety hazard, kids swimming nearby, insurance liability, standard stuff. Offers me $300 cash for a quick photo survey and basic report. The pieces clicked together in my head, but I kept quiet. So I drive out there, but the address she gave me, it's not a house. It's this old abandoned dock on the North Shore, been falling apart for years. Real hazard, that one. Broken boards, rusted bolts, the whole 9 yards. Jake's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I took the pictures she wanted, documented all the problems, filed the report with the photos. Seems like you did your job, I said carefully. He shook his head. That's when she tells me the report isn't for the dock I inspected. It's for some other dock, belongs to a guy named Davis. Says it's the same construction, same problems. Just wants to speed up the paperwork process. My blood went cold, but I kept my expression neutral. Did that seem right to you? Hell no, it didn't seem right, but she's waving $300 at me, and Emma's college acceptance letter is sitting on my kitchen table, so I signed the report and took the money. He buried his head in his hands. I never even looked at your dock. For all I know, it's solid as Fort Knox, but my signature is on a safety violation report that says it's about to collapse. I finished my beer, considering my next words carefully. That's quite a story, Jake. You probably think I'm a piece of shit, he said without looking up. I think you're a father trying to do right by his daughter, I replied, but I also think you know this situation isn't over. He raised his head, studied my face. What do you mean? I mean Karen's using your report to justify what she did to my property. And when this whole thing blows up, and it will blow up, whose name is going to be on the official paperwork? Jake went pale. Jesus, you think she'd throw me under the bus? I stood up, left a 20 on the bar. Jake, I've known women like Karen my whole life. They collect people's mistakes like trading cards. And when they need a fall guy, I put my hand on his shoulder. Think about what's more important. Keeping quiet about a crooked report or protecting your daughter's future when this mess lands on your desk. I walked toward the door, then stopped. If you decide you want to do the right thing, you know where to find me. Outside, the night air felt cleaner than it had in days. Jake Mills wasn't a bad kid, just a desperate father who'd made a mistake. The question was whether he'd learned from it or whether Karen had her hooks in him too deep to pull free. Behind me, I heard the tavern door open. Jake's voice called out across the parking lot. Ben, what if there was a way to fix this? I turned around slowly. I'm listening. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt like maybe the tide was beginning to turn. Sometimes the best allies are the ones who've already paid the price for being on the wrong side. Jake Mills was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Jake met me at the North Shore dock the next morning, camera in one hand and a thermos of coffee in the other. His face looked like he'd wrestled with his conscience all night and lost. The abandoned dock stretched into the lake like a broken promise. Half the board's missing, support posts leaning at angles that defied physics. "This is where I took the photos," he said, pointing at the worst section. "Karen told me to focus on the structural damage, get close-ups of the rusted bolts." He raised his camera, snapped a few shots. "See how the metal's corroded? How the wood's rotted through? This thing's been dangerous for years." I walked the length of the dock, noting every detail. "When was this built?" Jake checked his phone, scrolled through some notes. "Property records show 1987. Been abandoned since the original owner died in 2003. He looked up at me. "Your dock was built when?" "My father started it in 1982. We finished it together the summer I turned 16. So your dock is actually older, but in better condition." Jake lowered his camera. "Ben, I need you to understand. I never intended for this to happen. When Karen showed me the money and started talking about identical construction methods..." "Jake," I kept my voice steady. "I'm not here to make you feel worse. I'm here to figure out how to fix this." He nodded, relief washing over his face. "What do you need me to do?" "First, show me exactly what photos you took. Then we're going to document everything about this place. Condition, location, property records, the works." I pulled out my own phone. Karen made one mistake when she picked this dock for her fake inspection. "What's that?" I pointed to a metal plate bolted to the main post, green with age but still readable. "Property marker. Every dock on this lake has one. Tells you the lot number, construction date, and owner registration. This one says Lot 47, Lakeside Estates, registered 1987, owner H. Morrison Estate." Jake squinted at the plate, then pulled up something on his phone. "The report I filed listed your property as Lot 23, Maple Shore Drive, registered 1982, owner B. Davis. Different lots, different construction dates, different owners." I took photos of the property marker from multiple angles. Even if someone wanted to argue our docks were similar, these markers prove they're not the same structure. "Jesus," Jake breathed. "She really thought she could get away with this." We spent the next hour documenting everything. Jake showed me the exact angles he'd used for the original photos, explaining how Karen had directed him to focus on the worst damage. I photographed the property markers, the access road, even the view across the lake toward my actual dock, clearly visible and obviously different. As we worked, Jake opened up about the whole arrangement. She found me through the city directory, said she'd used my services before, which was weird because I'd never met her. Offered cash up front, said it was urgent because of insurance deadlines. "She played you," I said. "Probably researched you, found out about your daughter's college plans. Karen's good at finding people's pressure points." "Yeah, well, she found mine." Jake packed away his camera. "What happens now? If I come forward, I'll lose my job. No city's going to trust an inspector who admits to filing false reports." I understood his dilemma. Doing the right thing doesn't always protect you from the consequences of doing the wrong thing first. "Jake, let me ask you something. If you stay quiet and this blows up anyway, and it will, how do you think that ends for you?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring out over the water. "Probably worse than if I come clean now." "Probably." I checked my watch. "But here's the thing. I'm not asking you to confess to filing a false report. I'm asking you to file a corrected report. Document what you actually inspected, clarify the location, note the discrepancy." "That could work," he said slowly. "Frame it as discovering an administrative error rather than admitting to fraud." "Exactly. You notice the address mismatch during a follow-up review happens all the time with property inspections." I started walking back toward our trucks. "Karen's counting on you being too scared to speak up. She's betting that you'll keep quiet to protect yourself, even if it means letting her destroy an innocent man." Jake followed, his steps crunching on the gravel. "You know what the worst part is? I actually liked being an inspector. Thought I was helping people, keeping buildings safe. Now every time I write a report, I'm going to wonder if I'm being honest or just protecting my paycheck." "Then use that feeling," I told him. "Let it remind you why doing the right thing matters, even when it costs you something." We reached our vehicles. Jake stood by his truck for a moment, keys in his hand, looking like a man trying to decide which direction his life was going to go. "If I file the corrected report," he said, "Karen's going to know it came from me. She might try to retaliate." I thought about that. "Jake, Women like Karen only have as much power as people give them. The moment you stop being afraid of her, she becomes just another neighbor with an opinion. I open my truck door. Besides, by the time you file that report, Karen's going to have bigger problems than one honest inspector. What do you mean? I smiled, feeling pieces of a plan clicking into place. I mean, it's time to find out what other little arrangements Karen's been making, and I've got a feeling this fake inspection isn't the only corner she's been cutting. Jake nodded slowly. Ben, thanks for not making me feel like complete garbage about this. We all make mistakes, son. The measure of a man isn't whether he falls down. It's whether he gets back up and makes things right. As I drove away, I caught sight of Jake in my rearview mirror, still standing by his truck, phone pressed to his ear. Maybe calling his daughter, maybe calling his supervisor to schedule a corrected inspection report. Either way, Karen's carefully constructed house of lies was about to develop some serious structural problems. And unlike her fake safety inspection, these cracks were going to be impossible to hide. The county clerk's office smelled like old paper and fluorescent lights, staffed by a woman who looked like she'd been filing documents since the Eisenhower administration. I spread Jake's corrected inspection report across her desk, 3 pages of clean admissions that demolished Karen's entire story. I need to cross-reference these property records, I told her, pointing to the lot numbers. Official ownership documents, construction permits, the works. She disappeared into the back room, returned 20 minutes later with a manila folder thick as a phone book. Lot 47 and Lot 23. Everything's here, deeds, permits, inspection histories. She opened the folder, began laying out documents. Interesting coincidence, these 2 properties coming up together. How so? Well, Lot 47, the abandoned dock. It's been in estate litigation for 20 years. The Morrison heirs can't agree on what to do with it. She pulled out a legal notice. But look here, someone filed a development petition last month, wants to purchase the lot for private marina construction. My blood went cold. Who filed the petition? Lakeside Development Corporation. She handed me the paperwork, signed by the corporate officers. Let's see. Karen Whitmore, President, and Sandra Whitmore Chen, Secretary-Treasurer. There it was. Karen wasn't just destroying my dock for spite. She was clearing the way for her own private marina. The fake inspection, the insurance sabotage, even the storm timing, all designed to make my dock look dangerous while positioning herself to buy the abandoned property next door. What would something like that be worth? I asked. The clerk whistled low. Lakefront marina rights, in this market, $500,000 minimum, maybe more if they can get exclusive access permits. I photographed every document, thanked the clerk, and walked out into the afternoon sun, feeling like I'd just struck oil. Karen had been running a long con, using her position in the homeowner association to eliminate competition and create artificial scarcity. My dock wasn't just in her way. It was proof that private waterfront access was possible without paying her inflated marina fees. But knowing the truth and proving it were different things. I needed more than property records and a corrected inspection report. I needed Karen to admit what she'd done, on the record with witnesses. That evening, I made some calls. Old friends from my Army days, guys who'd learned different skills during their service time. By midnight, I had what I needed. A digital recorder smaller than a matchbook, and a plan that would make Karen's own greed work against her. The next morning, I called Karen directly. I want to make a deal. Her voice went cautious immediately. What kind of deal? The kind where I stop fighting the homeowner association and you stop trying to destroy my life. I let frustration leak into my voice. Not hard, considering. This whole thing has cost me more than I can afford. My boat, the fines, legal fees. I just want it over. Silence on the other end. I could practically hear her calculating, wondering if this was a trick. What exactly are you proposing? She asked finally. I'll sign a waiver acknowledging the safety violations, accept responsibility for the dock damage, pay the fines without appeal. I paused, let her think she was winning. In exchange, you drop the marina development petition and let me rebuild the dock to current code standards. I'm not sure what marina development you're referring to, Karen said carefully. Come on, Karen. I know about Lakeside Development Corporation. I know you've been planning this for months. I put genuine exhaustion in my voice. Look, I don't care about your business plans. I just want my dock back. Another pause, longer this time. Perhaps we should discuss this in person, she said. Are you free this afternoon? We agreed to meet at the neutral ground of Lakeview Park, the public access point halfway between our properties. I arrived early, activated the recorder, and positioned myself at a picnic table with a clear view of both approaches. Seed, recorder. Karen showed up 20 minutes later with Sandra in tow, both of them dressed like they were heading to a board meeting. They took seats across from me, folders and legal pads arranged like battle plans. Before we begin, Karen said, I want to be clear that any agreement we reach is contingent on full compliance with all association regulations. Of course, I spread my hands, playing the defeated neighbor. You've made your point. I just want this over with. Good. Karen opened her folder, pulled out a prepared document. This waiver acknowledges your responsibility for the safety violations and releases the association from any liability related to the emergency closure of your dock facilities. I skimmed the document, standard legal boilerplate designed to make me the bad guy in any future disputes. Looks fair, but I need assurance that you're willing to be reasonable about the marina situation. What marina situation? Sandra asked, shooting her sister a warning look. I smiled. The one where Lakeside Development Corporation builds a private marina on the Morrison Estate property. Look, I get it. You saw an opportunity, used your association position to eliminate competition, probably figured you could buy the land cheap after making everyone think waterfront access was too dangerous. Karen's face went stone cold. That's quite an accusation. It's not an accusation. It's just business. I leaned forward, keeping my voice conversational. You needed my dock to look dangerous to justify the emergency closure. You needed the closure to support your insurance claims about waterfront liability. And you needed the liability claims to pressure the Morrison estate into selling cheap. You're being paranoid, Karen said, but her hands were clenched tight around her pen. Am I? Because from where I sit, it looks like you orchestrated this whole thing. The fake inspection using photos from the abandoned dock. The emergency closure timed perfectly with the storm forecast. Even getting Martin Cross to back your story about me being hostile and dangerous. Sandra started to stand up. We don't have to listen to this. Sit down, Karen snapped. Her sister froze, half standing, then slowly lowered back into her chair. Ben, you're right about one thing. This has gone far enough, but you're wrong about our motivations. Enlighten me. Karen leaned back, studying my face like she was trying to decide how much truth I could handle. The Morrison property has been an eyesore for 20 years. Dangerous, unsupervised, attracting vandals, and creating liability for the entire community. When the opportunity arose to acquire it for proper development. You jumped at the chance, I finished, even if it meant destroying an innocent neighbor's property to clear the way. Your dock was legitimately dangerous, Karen insisted. The inspection confirmed multiple safety violations. I pulled out my phone, showed her photos of the real abandoned dock alongside shots of my property. Which dock was inspected, Karen? Because these are two different structures on two different lots with two different property markers. Her face went pale. Sandra grabbed her sister's arm, whispered something urgent in her ear. The inspector made an error, Karen said stiffly. Administrative mistake. These things happen. Jake Mills didn't make an error. You paid him to inspect the abandoned dock and file a report claiming it was mine. I kept my voice level, conversational. $300 cash to document safety violations on a dock he never actually saw. That's not... Karen's composure cracked. You can't prove any of this. I stood up, gathered my papers. Actually, Karen, I can prove all of it. Property records, corrected inspection reports, witness testimony from Jake Mills. The only question now is whether you want to settle this quietly or explain it to a county prosecutor. Both sisters were on their feet now, Sandra pulling at Karen's sleeve, Karen staring at me like I'd just grown a second head. What do you want? Karen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, feeling 20 years of neighborhood politics shift in my favor. I want exactly what I said. You drop the marina development, you rescind all fines related to my dock, and you publicly apologize to the homeowner association for the administrative errors that led to this misunderstanding. And if we refuse? Then Jake Mills files a formal complaint with the county about being coerced into falsifying an inspection report, and I file a civil suit for conspiracy, fraud, and intentional destruction of property. I tuck the recorder deeper into my jacket pocket. Payoff, recorder. Your choice, ladies. Karen looked at Sandra, then back at me. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked like exactly what she was, a small-town bully who'd finally picked the wrong target. We'll need time to consider your proposal, she said finally. You've got until tomorrow morning. After that, I take everything I've got to the authorities and let them sort it out. As I walked away, I heard Sandra's voice behind me. Karen, what the hell have you done? Good question. And one Karen was about to answer in front of a lot more people than just her sister. The next morning brought 3 things I didn't expect. A phone call from a reporter, a sheriff's deputy at my door, and Karen standing in my driveway at 7 a.m., looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight. We need to talk, she said, no pretense left in her voice. Sandra sat in the passenger seat of their car, staring straight ahead like she was pretending this wasn't happening. I poured myself coffee, didn't offer her any. Clock's ticking, Karen. What's it going to be? The deal you proposed yesterday, we accept. She fumbled in her purse, pulled out a folded document. Full retraction of all fines, public apology for administrative errors, withdrawal of the marina development petition. I read through the paper, comprehensive, exactly what I'd asked for, signed by both sisters. This seems too easy. Karen's laugh came out cracked and bitter. Easy? Ben, in the last 12 hours, I've gotten calls from the county prosecutor's office, the state inspector general, and a reporter from Channel 7 News. Apparently, someone filed a complaint about fraudulent property inspections in our district. I kept my expression neutral. Must have been Jake Mills. Good for him. The reporter wants to do a story about HOA abuse of power. She's already interviewed Jake, the county clerk, and half our neighbors. Karen's hands shook as she lit a cigarette. Did you know Mrs. Henderson has been keeping a diary of every questionable decision we've made in the last 2 years? Actually, I hadn't known that. Mrs. Henderson? Turns out she never liked us much, just went along to avoid making waves. But when she heard about the fake inspection, she called that reporter and offered to share her documentation of concerning association practices. Karen took a deep drag. 2 years of notes, Ben. Every shortcut, every favor for friends, every time we bent the rules. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same neighbor who'd dismissed my concerns and supported Karen at the meeting had been secretly documenting every questionable thing they'd done. Sometimes the people you think are against you are just waiting for permission to be on your side. So, you're accepting my terms to avoid a news story? I'm accepting your terms because my lawyer says if this goes to court, we could lose everything. The house, the business, Sandra's kids' college funds. She dropped the cigarette, ground it under her heel. 20 minutes of greed, and it's going to cost us our whole lives. I studied her face, looking for the manipulation, the angle she was working. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen before, genuine fear. Karen Whitmore, neighborhood tyrant, reduced to begging for mercy from the man she'd tried to destroy. There's one more thing, I said. Her shoulders sagged. What now? The apology. I want it done properly. Full association meeting, all neighbors invited. Complete explanation of what happened and why. I finished my coffee, and I want you to resign from the association board. Ben, please, the resignation would be non-negotiable. I set down my mug. You used your position to run a scam. That ends now. 20 minutes later, Karen and Sandra drove away, leaving me standing in my driveway with a signed agreement and the strange feeling that comes when a long fight finally ends. Not triumph exactly, more like exhaustion mixed with relief. That evening, the association meeting drew the biggest crowd I'd ever seen. 53 neighbors packed into the community center, word having spread about dramatic revelations and public apologies. Channel 7 had even sent a camera crew. Karen stood at the front of the room. No PowerPoint presentation this time, just a woman facing the consequences of her choices. Her voice shook as she read from a prepared statement. The association leadership made serious errors in judgment regarding recent safety inspections and property enforcement actions. These errors resulted from administrative confusion and poor communication with inspection personnel. We apologize to Mr. Davis for the inconvenience and expense caused by these mistakes. It was sanitized language, carefully crafted to avoid admitting criminal behavior while still acknowledging fault. But every person in that room understood what was really being said. Karen had been caught running a scam, and this was her public surrender. Additionally, Karen continued, Sandra and I are resigning from the association board effective immediately. We feel it's best for the community if new leadership guides the association moving forward. The room erupted in whispers and murmurs. Martin Cross, my old friend who'd betrayed me just a week earlier, caught my eye from across the room and nodded. Not quite an apology, but acknowledgement that he'd been wrong. Mrs. Henderson stood up in the back. Mr. Davis, would you be willing to serve on the new board? I think we need someone who understands the importance of following proper procedures. The room turned toward me. 53 neighbors waiting for my answer. 6 months ago, I would have said yes immediately, would have jumped at the chance to fix the system that had nearly destroyed me. But sitting there, looking at all those faces, I realized something. I didn't want power over my neighbors. I just wanted to live in peace beside the lake, fish on weekends, and remember my father without someone else's drama poisoning the water. I appreciate the confidence, I said, standing up. But I think the association needs fresh blood, people who want to serve the community instead of controlling it. I've got a dock to rebuild. 3 weeks later, I stood on new planks, solid as anything my father ever built, watching the sunrise paint the lake gold and orange. My insurance had covered the boat replacement. Turned out Karen's fraudulent complaint actually helped my case when the adjuster learned the truth. Jake Mills had been suspended for 30 days, but kept his job after the county decided his cooperation outweighed his initial mistake. Karen and Sandra had moved away, sold their house to a young couple with twin toddlers who waved at me from their yard every morning. The Morrison estate property remained abandoned. The heirs had withdrawn it from sale after learning about the attempted development scam. Sometimes I think about that night in the old Beacon when Jake first told me about the fake inspection. If he hadn't been honest, if his conscience hadn't finally won out over his fear, Karen might have gotten away with it. She'd have had her marina, I'd have lost my dock, and nobody would have ever known the truth. That's the thing about bullies. They count on good people staying quiet. They build their power on the assumption that everyone else will choose the easy path, avoid confrontation, let sleeping dogs lie. But sometimes, if you're lucky, you find allies in unexpected places. An inspector with a guilty conscience, a nosy neighbor with a diary, a community that's finally had enough of being pushed around. And sometimes, the best victory isn't destroying your enemies. It's watching them destroy themselves while you rebuild everything they tried to take away. The water lapped against the new dock posts, steady as a heartbeat, carrying away the last traces of a fight that should never have happened, but did happen, and ended exactly the way it should have. With truth winning out over lies, and an old man fishing in peace on a dock his father would have been proud of. Some battles are worth the cost. This was one of them.